we traveled, and we lived different places. And I was born in the United States, but then traveled to France and lived there for a year and a half. And then the president kicked all the Americans out of France, and so then I moved to Germany and lived there for another couple of years. And so I grew up speaking 3 languages, French, German, and English, but all in the same sentence. And no one understood me. So I thought from that point forward, I will only speak 1 language. So, but I thank you for being here, for allowing me to be here. I'm honored to be here. What do you call it when a person speaks 3 languages? Trilingual. What do you call a person who speaks 2 languages?
Bilingual.
Bilingual. What do you call a person who speaks 1 language? American, a gringo. Thank you.
Model.
So I apologize for not knowing Spanish, but you have a great translator. I feel like he's been my own translator up until this point. Now he's yours. So we are going to speak about integrating Industry 4.0 and the Kaizen culture. And my task is to motivate you and get you to understand that the 2 are complementary forces. When we first look at integrating Industry 4.0 and the Kaizen culture, many of us have a reaction that the 2 are not integratable, that it can't be done. They are opposing forces. And as many of the speakers before me have alluded to, my goal is to make sure that we understand that these are complementary forces, and we need to work towards that. Occasionally I run into some operational excellence people who are concerned about the future and what Industry 4.0 will do to them, and will it replace all the work that we've learned and all the strides that we've made over the past couple of decades. Of course it will not, because we will always have people, and as long as there's people, we will always need to have a Kaizen culture, and we will need to develop that. And in fact, we may need it even more because of the perception that people will have that we don't have to do what we've been doing in the past. We don't have to go on a gimbal walk. We don't have to problem solve. This is not necessary because of Industry 4.0, and all of this will be done for us. And the great strides that we have made could be lost. As long as we have people, we will need a Kaizen culture. So, to discuss this more, we talk about the 2 unstoppable complementary forces. And when I talk about unstoppable, they are unstoppable for a couple of reasons. Industry 4.0 is coming. It's here. We've seen it. We've all seen it. And it's going to keep continuing. The Kaizen culture is an unstoppable force as long as we have people and the need to use people's minds and skills and respect the minds and skills of all the individuals that are working within our organization. We will still need to have it. And both of those working together, not opposing forces, but together, will lead to greater quantum leaps like we had during the first revolution, during the second revolution, and during the third revolution. These will let us enjoy quantum leaps in productivity, quality, and of course, allowing us greater throughput and flexibility. So how do we put this together? How do we bring them together? What are the examples of bringing them together? So first we have to discuss what is what is Industry 4.0? It's of course the buzzword of today. We know about it, we've heard about it, it's coming. It originated from the high-tech strategy sessions that were held in Germany, within the German government, to move forward, to surpass competing nations, to move at such a rate that it will leave other nations in the dust. And the work members were recognized as the founders of IO 4.0. It is recognized as the 4th Industrial Revolution. And of course we've seen slides like this throughout this morning discussing the different revolutions. We started off with the first revolution, of water and steam. allowing the agricultural industry to grow, to prosper. Mechanization that allowed us to travel across the country. Locomotion, other forms of transportation. It was a huge industrial revolution. Then we moved on to Industrial Revolution number 2. The second one, mass production, assemblies, electricity. This is a big part. This is where Henry Ford started. And Henry Ford, as we all know, was one of the main initiators, one of the main founders of what we call Kaizen today, of what we call Lean today. His goal, his dream, was to ensure that everyone could afford to purchase a car. Even those people who produced the cars, manufactured the cars. His goal was to be able to get to the point to allow them to afford to buy those same very cars. But back in those early days, of course, cars were manufactured in a garage-type environment. And as you study the operation, people realize that you can't manufacture a vehicle, a product this complex in a garage where operators would go and fetch parts, gather parts from different areas. As you study this, Henry Ford realized that this is crazy. These people who are such the key people in adding value to the product are spending half their time or more of the time retrieving parts. This doesn't make sense. And that's when he realized the parts must come to the car. The assembler must be there at the car. They must not waste their time in transportation and motion. It must be there, border of line. So back then, we had this second revolution. The revolution of mass assembly, assembly line electricity. But it worked hand in hand with the early concepts of what we now call Lean. They worked hand in hand together. Then the third revolution began, focused on computers and automation, robotics. I started my career with the Saturn Corporation of General Motors. Some of you may remember the Saturn Corporation. It was a new division within GM. It was all the rage. It was a big deal. And I was lucky enough and very fortunate to graduate from college and start at the Saturn Corporation. And I can remember learning about such things as the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. It's a big deal in the United States. Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. And around that time, one of the assembly plants at GM had won the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. That plant was called Hamtramck in Detroit. And it's kind of an interesting story as to how they won that award, because their results were astounding. It was fantastic. Quality just shot up like a rocket. Productivity was fantastic. Well, part of that was because prior to that, the dream at Hamtramck was to almost replace most of the human beings and use complete robotics. So robots were brought in by the dozens to the facility. And following that, they realized tremendous productivity losses and quality losses. They tried to focus in on improving processes and their quality systems by bringing in automation and robotics and replacing human beings. They realized it wasn't working. Hamtramck had some of the worst results of any plant within GM. And so from that point on, they started to use robotics more conscientiously. Where are they best used? Where are they not best used? And put human beings back to work in the areas where they should be working, where they could work better than a robot. That's why Hamtramck's quality records and results soared. It was after they turned from robotics and automation to a more balanced approach. But the two needed to work hand in hand. It was realized that we need computers and automation and robotics to work with people. The two were seen as complementary forces. At Kaizen, we believe that we must also always Kaizen first and invest second. It's still our approach. It should be anyone's approach. Look for the improvements to the process first and invest secondarily. So during the third revolution, we realized that the two are complementary forces. The Kaizen way, Kaizen approach, Kaizen culture, and automation. Now we face the same dilemma as we go through the fourth generation, the fourth industrial revolution, cyber-physical systems. It's going to be the same story. We will still have people, and with people we will need a Kaizen culture. So we need to understand what a cyber-physical system is, and how we can benefit from it, and how to integrate that into a lean culture. But we need to make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of like a Hamtramck plant, and that we understand the technological experts and the operational experts together, work together to understand each of each other's strengths and have an integrated approach that will be beneficial to all. So what does Industry 4.0 actually consist of? Well, it consists of, as you know and you've heard, many different parts. Machines exchanging information, data, amongst themselves, upstream and downstream processes. If there's a problem with one machine and it goes down, it might affect the logistics. It might affect what a material handler does. A notification is received. It might affect mating parts. It might affect the production of mating parts. It might affect maintenance and predictive maintenance. And what maintenance should occur at that point in time, or at some later point in time. And then take that data, accumulate that data, analyze the data so that it's understood when the next potential downfall or problem may occur. Machines exchanging information and data with people in real time. I mean, real time has always been the dream. I'm sure many of you are involved in organizations that use statistical process control, SPC. SPC's been around for a long time. Dr. Deming, the great late Dr. Deming, preached statistical process control many years ago. In many organizations, we don't do it right. The data is looked at afterwards, after the fact. So it's not in real time. But the goal, as we know, was always that data related to statistical process control is analyzed real time. We just haven't done a good job with that in many cases. Machines in Industry 4.0 will be able to ensure that we look at out-of-control points and we adjust machines and we adjust other machines and other processes upstream and downstream of the process, and people will get that data and understand that data, and there'll be some type of alert system, if you will, to ensure that everyone knows when we have an out-of-control condition. Components themselves will report data on where they are in the process so that we know exactly where all of our components, all of our parts, all our materials are located throughout the process. And this might affect the production of other materials and other components and affect the amount of parts or materials that are brought to the assembly line. Because the components and the materials will talk to themselves. And they'll understand information about where they go next and when they go there next. It's like a giant machine, a giant system of communication that we can all react, parts, components, and so forth, machines can all react under the given conditions and do what's right for the overall process. Control programs will then react when machines fail. They'll react perhaps by maintaining themselves or communicating with other machines in order to pick up production or slow down production, as it will. And finally, parts and programs and people like in the case of a hospital, will understand how to process, where they are in the process, with little to no human intervention. Those are the components of Industry 4.0. That's what it consists of. Why does it exist? Well, quite simply, it exists because of our competitive needs. To serve our customers better, faster, and at lower cost. To provide our customers with more flexibility. Smaller volumes, higher complexity, and also to reduce waste, all of the waste, whether it's defects, overproduction, inventory, and to make your processes more lean. That's why that exists. I know you know that. That's not rocket science. We all understand that. But there's a reason why I put the slide up here. And you'll see the exact same words a little bit later, because it should sound familiar. Now, with regard to Kaizen and a Kaizen culture, what does Kaizen mean? It means to change for the better, or to break apart to make better, or to cause disruption. Kaizen is about developing habits of improvement, developing habits of analyzing data, developing habits of coaching people the right way so that they learn and we respect their minds and their skills. It takes a lot of practice. It's a skill. It takes a lot of perseverance. But it's something that we try to do. So that's Kaizen. Now, what is a Kaizen culture? Well, Kaizen culture, which is what we're trying to integrate with Industry 4.0, is that long-term based business excellence system that creates a sustainable competitive advantage. That's what we're trying to do. But it's people-based. Toyota said, and many of the CEOs and C-suite individuals within Toyota over the decades have said that we are in the business of growing people. We are in the business of maturing people, leadership. This is a business excellence system, and as long as we have people, we will need a business excellence system that's focused on people. Kaizen culture is also a work environment in which all employees, every day, work to eliminate waste. It's about continuous improvement, not continual improvement. There's a little bit of a difference between the two. A continuous improvement is making those improvements every single day. Everybody, the little improvements, the small improvements that we all can make. Continual improvement is more periodic in nature. Once in a while, we'll do a project, a Kaizen event, once a month. And companies say they're doing lean, they're doing Kaizen. But they're really not. Not until they get to the point of doing continuous improvement on an everyday basis. And that's the core. That's the foundation of a Kaizen culture, is every single person making those improvements every single day. But it's also constantly focused on the process. Now there's a lot of hardware systems, software systems, programs, Internet of Things. Anything that we have out there that's electronic in nature may not necessarily be process focused. It still may be department focused or metric focused. What I'm saying is there's a lot of tools out there, a lot of things out there that we could use. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's process focused. At the core of the Kaizen culture is to be constantly focused on the process. We may not do that with technology alone. It's about respect and involvement of all the people. One of the key principles within the Kaizen culture is respecting and involving all the people. My fear is that with Industry 4.0, we could get away from that. We could. Because, as I said earlier, we tend to think, that Industry 4.0 and all of its elements will fix our problems. It'll address all of our problems. We don't have to do these things anymore. We don't have to solve our problems. That's not true. We will always have problems. As Sebastian said in the previous conversation, the previous speech, is that things change all the time. It's not a stable, static environment. We know this. Things change all the time. How do we react to that? Human beings must react to that and address those issues. To do so effectively, we must respect the minds, the skills of all individuals working within the organization. And finally, it's about creation of flow. This is the Kaizen culture, the creation of constant flow. Again, technology by itself does not necessarily mean that it will respect flow. The technological experts that truly know about Industry 4.0, first need to understand the concepts and the principles by which we abide to see how it all fits in together. They need to understand about the constant elimination of waste, the respect for people. All of these things are important to an overall effective functioning system. So what we try to do, of course, is create flow. We do that by the elimination of non-value added. I know you know this. You've probably seen this many times in many other forms. But what we have here is a large process. A process that's full of value-added and non-value-added activities. In red are the non-value-added activities. When we try to create flow and eliminate non-value-added activities, we identify those and we say, okay, how do we get rid of them? How can we mesh? How do we eliminate or modify or decrease the amount of non-value-added activities? And then bring it all together. Okay, so you know this. This is nothing new. It all goes back to the origins of the Toyota Production Company. I mean, back in the late 1940s, after the war, one of the major Toyota plants was bombed severely. Toyota was on the brink of declaring bankruptcy. They had offers from the Japanese government and the US government of loans, but that went against their grain. They've never believed in being reliant on another source. They believed in being self-reliant. And they said that the only way we can do this is to get ourselves out of this. And to do that, we have to manage our company like you all manage, and I manage my home. Money comes in and money goes out. I want more money coming in than goes out. And the timing has to be right. So how do we do that? They looked at this timeline that's similar to the drawing that you saw up here. And they said, okay, we have this process, this long process. And we need to get paid by the customers of our cars before we pay the suppliers of the materials that went into that car. That's our goal, to get paid by the customers buying our cars before we pay the suppliers of the materials that go into the car. How do we do that? We constantly shrink. Constantly identify the waste along the process and constantly shrink. Okay? Now, that's the past. That's what happened. That's how we got to this point. So what about now? We're still trying to do the same thing. Industry 4.0 can help us do this. It's still the same goal. Is to get rid of all the non-value-added activities. But what a technological expert might think of non-value-added might be different than what you think and what I think as an operational expert as non-value-added. We need to have this process focused. We need to be properly aligned. We need to be working together to ensure that we have complementary forces, or they are complementary forces. And all of this, of course, will result in great things, as you know, like less stock, reduced complexity, reduced costs, higher flexibility, better quality and service. And all of our measures will go in the right direction for growth, quality, cost, delivery, and motivation of the people. It will just be greatly enhanced if we integrate Industry 4.0 into the Kaizen way of thinking, into a Kaizen culture. Not necessarily lead the effort, because that can happen. But the lead of the effort of improvement should always be development of the Kaizen culture, and improvement of the people, and development of the people. And Industry 4.0 is only a tool that's only going to enhance that. So why does a Kaizen culture exist? To serve customers better, faster, and at a lower cost. To provide customers with their specific needs and increase flexibility. To get rid of waste, all the waste. And to make your processes more lean. It's the same slide I showed before when I said, why does Industry 4.0 exist? They have the same purpose. They have the same goal. They should be integrated. It's all about integration. You know, in my past, I've done a lot of work with Lean, of course, Kaizen. I've done a lot of work with quality management systems. So helping companies develop ISO 9001 systems. I'm a Six Sigma black belt. You know what always drove me crazy? Is that you would have different departments in companies that are responsible for Six Sigma and Lean and ISO 9001 and quality management systems when they all have the same purpose. That's wasteful. That's wasteful. And yet, we are the ones, the operational experts are the ones that are talking about getting rid of waste. Sometimes we have to clean up our own house. I wrote a book one time called Lean ISO 9001, the integration of the two. I see this as the same thing. We need to look at, every time we introduce something new, we shouldn't just let it be introduced and bring it into the organization as a new entity. We should say, where does it fit in? Where does it make sense? Where does it overlap with what we're doing right now? And this is an example of that. I can imagine some companies saying, we're going to have an Industry 4.0 expert and a department. And then we don't integrate it with our own Lean experts. That in itself is wasteful. And shame on us if we allow it to happen. So the little photo on this picture is trying to demonstrate, let's bring the two together. Let's make them one. How do we do that? What are examples of that? So, we have our traditional way of innovation versus the Kaizen way. I have a nice little graph here. It shows on the bottom a traditional method or traditional way of improvement. And you see that we make some jumps and we go through perhaps another event or improvement exercise, or maybe we automate and we have another little jump. Now, in the traditional method, our focus was on the third transformation, the third revolution, automation. And again, we've always said, well, automation by itself doesn't do it. Again, we should be focusing in on Kaizen first, investment second, or automation second. And automation would focus in on some of our value-added activities and try to improve cycle times of our value-added activities. And so the improvements that we oftentimes got was very little. And so that's what you see in the graph. Very little improvement, but still nonetheless improvement. Because we were not focused on the non-value-added activities. If we focus in on non-value-added activities, we have much better results. The Kaizen way takes the approach of doing just that. Let's focus in on all of our non-value-added activities. So in the slide, what you see in a blue circle there, the blue circle shows, prior to the blue circle, you see a big quantum improvement, a Kaizen event, maybe a value stream mapping, followed by several Kaizen events. A big quantum improvement. And then as you see within the circle, is the variability being reduced. Variability is being reduced, and at the high end of the performance within the blue circle. How do we do that? Well, we do that through our constant Kaizen, our daily Kaizen, everyday Kaizen. Whether they're huddle meetings, visual management, constant improvement, standard development. And we have this improvement that continues on. And then we go through and we stabilize, and we have a process that is now stable, and we say, you know what, it's time to make another quantum leap. And we're going to do that through a breakthrough Kaizen. Or again, value stream mapping, successive Kaizen events. We're going to make that improvement, and then our daily Kaizen is going to stabilize once again. That's our approach. That's the approach that we all take today. Leaders Kaizen is important too. Leaders Kaizen from the perspective of what is the leader's responsibility? How are they involved in value stream mapping and their involvement in Kaizen events? How do they go to the Gemba? How do they coach their people?
How do they challenge their people respectfully? How do we teach people in a standard way? How do we make sure that all of our events, all of our improvement activities are tied to our strategic objectives? That's Leaders Kaizen. And then we have Support Kaizen. And Support Kaizen is all about, well, what's that foundation within the organization? Who's our mentors? Who's our coaches? Who's our facilitators? Who's going to make sure that we're getting value out of all of this and that we improve the improvement process? That's through Support Kaizen. Those are the elements. And it's much better than the old way of improvement. So why do I show you this? Well, the question is, where does Industry 4.0 fit in? Where does it fit into this model? And I would say primarily Industry 4.0 is going to fit in when we do Kaizen events and when we do value stream mapping. And our focus will be, number one, to improve the process, but then secondarily, we will also focus on Industry 4.0 techniques. That's where it can help. Now, Industry 4.0 can also assist in our daily Kaizen efforts with the data that we receive, the reaction inputs that we receive so that we are learning properly. But it's not a big influencer. It is an influencer. It's primarily an influencer on our breakthrough Kaizens, our value stream mapping, our Kaizen events. Now, I put this chart up here to show you that breakthrough Kaizen by itself is going to be helpful in that regard. But it doesn't have very much to do with our daily Kaizen habits. It doesn't have very much to do with our Leaders Kaizen habits. And it doesn't have very much to do with our Support Kaizen habits. It is a cog, a very important cog, something that will help in our efforts to increase year-over-year quality improvements, productivity improvements, etc. But it's not a replacement, by no means. The four elements become important of daily Kaizen, breakthrough Kaizen, Leaders Kaizen, Support Kaizen. They're all necessary. Industry 4.0 will primarily help us with breakthrough Kaizen and helping us to deliver and get us to our overall strategy, what we're trying to achieve, big picture. So it's the combination of the two, the Kaizen culture and Industry 4.0. These should be looked at as complementary forces, requiring collaboration, absolutely requiring and mandating collaboration. They have the same goal. Let's not be wasteful in our efforts. We need to work together to strive towards the same things. Now, what kind of collaboration is required? I use the general term of operational experts or operation excellence experts. It could be a Kaizen leader, value stream manager. But these people need to embrace the change of Industry 4.0. Use those new technologies to our advantage. Keeping in mind the concepts that we believe, because we know that the concepts and the principles that we know and breathe and have been doing now for many years are proven. And they're necessary. We need collaboration to ensure adaptability and flexibility within the overall system. We need to ensure collaboration is there to embrace technology during value stream mapping to attain those breakthrough improvements and even greater improvements that we've experienced up until this point. In many of my value stream maps that I do with organizations, I've always required in the past couple of years that someone from IT must be involved. Sub-technological experts must be involved throughout the entire process. In almost every project I work on, there will be a number of actions for that group. And so that's part of the collaboration up front and the understanding up front. But I always make sure that they understand it's the process that comes first. It's It's the process that comes first, improving the process before investing. We need to make those technological experts mandatory involvement. And the operational experts, us, in here, we need to advise. We need to advise. We need to take charge of understanding why we do have a need for technology, that it can't be done another way. Who collaborates with whom? That's part of our responsibility to ensure that we see that collaboration and which of the technologies that we know is needed and how. But we need to gain understanding of what those technologies are. What are the capabilities? And is this the best approach for an overall system? As operational experts, we have certain skills. We have to understand that we have certain skills that technological experts may not have. And those skills include seeing waste. We know seeing waste is a skill. I know it is. It's a skill I'm still trying to develop. And I will always try to develop it. I feel like sometimes, if you haven't done a project at home, has anyone done a project, a lean project at home? Yes? Not too many. There's a few of you. But I would challenge you, because sometimes when you start to really feel like you're seeing waste, you see it at home all the time. It's hard not to see. I did a video some time ago about doing the laundry in our home. So I brought in 2 camera people and a lighting person. My wife loved it. She didn't love it. But we filmed the laundry process. And we identified all kinds of waste. And I made a whole bunch of improvements. And now I do my own laundry. That was one of the downsides. But I have a better process, I think. I know I do. So, seeing waste is a skill. And technological experts may have no clue. We have to know that we have a skill. And it is a skill that has been honed. And they may not have it. So we have to honor that and be proud of the fact that we have that skill and to teach it to our technological experts. We know about people systems. We know about things like coaching and getting the best out of people and asking hard questions by challenging people's minds. We know about respect and involvement. Every single tool in the Lean kit, the Lean toolkit, is about respect and involvement. That's the core, that's the basis of it. We know about visual management systems and the importance of visual management systems and how we learn better and we retain information and knowledge better with visual management systems. And that could be on the physical side, but it also could be in the cyber side. What visual management systems do we have electronically in our networks? With our programs, our databases, our registries. Visual management systems apply to those areas as well. We know about change management. We know about what people want. We know that the purpose, as Shigeo Shingo said, the purpose of continuous improvement is to make everyone's lives easy. And it describes the 14 principles of the Toyota Way. And the 8th principle is to use only reliable, thoroughly tested technology that serves your people and your processes. It's not the other way around. There's an if statement there. We will use the technology if it serves our people and our processes. If. We don't just put it in because it's the coolest thing. It's the latest thing. Everyone's doing it. It has to serve the process and the people in order to be successful. Dr. Denning preached this years ago. This is a principle. So what? You might say, what's so what? It's a principle. Principles don't change. Principles don't change with time. If it's a principle 100 years ago, it will still be a principle 200 years from tomorrow. This will always be there as a principle. It's there to serve us. What we have done too often is get crazy about the latest thing and just do it. Like the Hamtramck plant and robotics. And they inserted their robotics needlessly. Collaboration is required because we also have that process focus. We understand about processes. A lot of organizations complained about their implementation with SAP. And one of the complaints was that it was department focused. It was functional focused. It was not process focused. This goes for other software programs, ERP systems as well. Okay? What's the point? The point is that technology itself, by itself, may not have a focus on the process like we all know is important. We know about how to build and sustain a culture of continuous improvement. We know how to do that, and that's still going to be necessary 100 years from today. We understand the tools of Kaizen and understand the concepts and principles behind them and how to use them in the electronic world, in the cyber-physical world. We have to change our thinking. It's like something like 5S as an example. Everyone associates, pretty much everyone associates 5S with the physical world. A maintenance department, a process area. Does 5S have a home in the cyber-physical world? Does it have a home in the networking world? Absolutely. Big time. Think about the messes that you all have and I have on my laptop, in your networks, in your folders. That's our working space, and yet it's a disaster in many organizations. How did these programs work together? How did they function together? How did they communicate? Is that clearly understood? Because if it was, or if it was not, then we're not applying the second S and 5S, which is set in order. Why does it take so long to run our programs? To find our files, to find our folders? Because it's not set in order. So all of these tools have a place. And we understand those tools. We just need to understand how to apply them in this new cyber-physical world. It's all applicable, though. We also understand how to manage the value stream, the importance of the value stream. The importance of the value stream over departments, over metrics. So, I thought what I'd do is show you a few examples. Just a few examples, and there's many more than this, but just some examples on some of the common tools that we have in the Lean world, in the Kaizen world, and kind of say, well, how does this relate to Industry 4.0? So some examples that I'll just briefly cover: TPM, and overall equipment effectiveness, the 3 golden rules of Kaizen leader, Poka-yoke, standard work development and improvement of standard work, SBC, Kamishibai, and 5S. So going through a few examples. Total productive management, and of course the key metric, overall equipment effectiveness. We talk in TPM about the 16 losses. What are those 16 losses? I don't think I've ever known anyone to memorize them all. And I'm not actually asking you to recite them. But which of those 16 efficiency losses might be positively affected by a cyber-physical system? How can it help us in the Lean Kaizen world? How can it help us if we introduce some cyber-physical systems? Well, here's your 16 kinds of losses. Many of you are probably familiar with these. You got your availability losses, your productivity losses, and your production losses. If we looked at the first one under availability loss, we have machine failure losses. Okay, so if we introduced Industry 4.0 into machine failure losses, we would understand the types of failures that we have, the frequency. We would be able to predict when those failures could occur in the future. When we have failures, we would be able to communicate, the machine would be able to communicate with other machines to increase or decrease production. We would have the data as to why those failure losses occur, And with that data, we can make wiser, more supporting decisions. Machine failure losses also could result in reduced output. If we have reduced output, then it might affect logistics and how quickly we bring materials or parts to that line by communication between the two systems. So that's an example. Setup and adjustments. With setup and adjustments, we can have real-time data on how long it does take to do a setup, to do an adjustment, to do a changeover. And as we have that data, we can react to understand, well, what's going on? So Industry 4.0 would allow us to say, okay, we are behind times, we are behind the standard. What do we do about that? Who do we communicate that with? What alerts do we send to certain people so that we can react to it real time, not later? So we can continue to go through this list of the overall 16 kinds of losses, but I think you understand that in TPM alone and reduction of these losses, that Industry 4.0 can be very beneficial to our needs, to what we're trying to do. When we try to eliminate our losses, we typically have our 5 targets. The 5 targets to zero losses include maintaining basic manufacturing conditions, maintaining operating conditions, eliminate breakdowns, identify and eliminate failure modes, and improve quality performance. Now, how do we do this? Where does Industry 4.0 fit in? Where does a Kaizen culture fit in? Well, I would say they both fit in different parts. Maintaining basic manufacturing conditions is a report system, a loop-back system. If we're not maintaining operating conditions, including facility conditions, that information and data is brought back to the correct machine. It's brought back to the correct equipment, whether it's facility-related or production-related, and it adjusts accordingly so that we can maintain those. Same thing with our operating conditions. So Industry 4.0 can help us definitely with those first 2 steps. Now, eliminating breakdowns, that's kind of a combination. Industry 4.0 will provide the data that we need and understand the cause and effect relationship from one machine to another machine and see where those causes or potential causes are. But in order to decipher root causes, we need people. We need the Kaizen culture. We need people focused on problem solving. Identifying and eliminating failure modes. That's a combination of Industry 4.0 and developing that Kaizen culture together, hand in hand. And of course, improving our quality performance. We need a Kaizen culture to do that. So the point is to show you that Industry 4.0 can aid us in a tool such as TPM and increase our overall equipment effectiveness by integrating the two. By not fighting the system, but by teaching technological experts about the 16 losses, understanding those and saying, this is the information that we need, this is the data that we need, this is how we need one machine to react to another machine. Now, what about the 3 golden rules of a Kaizen leader? At Kaizen Institute, we talk about the 3 golden rules of a Kaizen leader. So I ask you, if I show you the 3 rules, which of the following golden rules of being a Kaizen leader might be positively affected by a cyber-physical system, and how? Well, our golden rule number 3, we're going in reverse order, so 3, 2, 1, is to implement required improvements and identify more potential improvements. How do we do this? We, of course, use practical problem solving. We encourage team members to do the same. We put a containment action in place. We look for root cause analysis and try to determine the root causes. And we ensure our improvement is somehow linked to a KPI that the team has control over. So, the question is, how can Industry 4.0 help us to improve this? Can it? Does it have an effect on this golden rule? And I would say, yes, it does. It does. First of all, with Industry 4.0, we'll have the data. We can determine what data that we need. But if there's a problem, we can understand what are the potential causes, either previous processes, previous materials that are used as inputs, previous tools that are used as inputs, because this data would be available, and we can see that relationship between cause and effect. If we're able to gain that data and information by looking at and analyzing the data, then we can do a much better job at improving the overall process and the KPIs. Golden rule number 2, monitor and communicate team performance. Today we talk about using the visual team board. Team board should be at the location of value, where value is added. Ideally, we like hour-by-hour management and hour-by-hour feedback. In the Industry 4.0 world, we can improve upon that. Maybe we can get half hour by half hour, 10 minute by 10 minute, 5 minute by 5 minute, 1 minute by 1 minute, part by part data. And be able to react to that real time. The goal is to get to the point of real time. We've been talking about it for decades. We haven't done a good job with it. This is an opportunity where Industry 4.0 can give us this data. As far as visual team boards, I don't care if it's electronic or if it's manual. It still applies. It's still necessary for us to see the score. Just like at that football game. American football or regular football. We need to see that score all the time. Can you imagine going to a football game and not seeing the score and how much time is left? That will still always exist as long as we have people. It can just now be improved. Golden rule number 1. Respond to team member call within cycle. I'm trying to remember the term Sebastian used. Is Sebastian here? What was it? Some kind of boost? Alert boost? No. Anyway, I'm going to look at your notes. Reaction boost, thank you. Reaction boost. This is the same thing here. This is that reaction boost. So in one of the organizations that I've worked with, they did that. They had a nice little system. That did work. Anytime the machine went down, there was an alert sent to the team leader's phone. And that team leader had to go over to the machine and press a button to signify that they were there and working on the problem. Now, they could actually press the button and walk away if they wished to, but there's some level of accountability because all of the team members see that person in the area, and they're going to want to have him work on the problem. If that person did not respond, that leader did not respond within 2 minutes, then automatically an alert would go to that person's boss. It was an accountability system that went up the ladder. Okay? That's all through Industry 4.0 technology. It's the communication between two devices that would not normally communicate to each other. Forcing a reaction, forcing something to happen. This would allow this to happen. This would can improve the ability of a team member to call, to be there, to resolve the problem, to help resolve the problem within a certain cycle time. So that's one other element. How about another element? Something like Pokioke or mistake proofing. Well, let's break down mistake proofing. What are the different types of mistake proofing? Well, you have the best form of mistake proofing. That's the contact. Contact involves the physical contact between two or more things. So as an example, an electrical outlet, it uses physical contact or a physical shape to prevent wrong voltages being plugged in. We know about that. It's the best form. Do we have these types of examples? Do we have these types of examples in the cyber-physical world? Well, yes, we do. They're just different. It's a different type of contact. I mean, if you're ordering something on Amazon or wherever it might be, and you have to input information, and you're supposed to input your email address, and then input it a second time, and if you don't type it in correctly the second time, it's not going to let you go further. It's a type of mistake proofing. It's a type of contact mistake proofing. So, in the cyber-physical world, it still applies. Our abilities, our capabilities, to make sure that mistake proofing occurs in these examples are still present. The second best types of mistake proofing include performance step. That involves monitoring steps and process and trigger an outcome if the step is not performed correctly. This is today's world. This is what we do today. We've been doing this for years. What's the difference? The difference is that now, in an Industry 4.0 world, we're going to involve monitoring steps in a process and triggering an outcome in another process, on another machine, in another building, at our supplier's location. It's not that machine. We're taking it elsewhere. It's the same idea. We're just applying it bigger scope. And the same thing with the second part, fixed value. It involves setting specific values that trigger an outcome and having that process count up to that trigger. Now we just don't do it on that machine, but we do it on another machine. What happens on one machine can affect another machine, or it can affect logistics in another area. And so all we're doing is poking up the concepts at a higher level, at a bigger scope, at a bigger picture. The third best type of mistake proofing is just making it easier to do it right. These are your visual things. Colors and color coding, symbols, shapes, operator ignition, audio detection, checklists, forms, procedures, simplified workflows. Okay, we will have now more complex workflows that will be harder to understand. All of the programs and the interactions between the programs, the PLCs, the machines, will be harder for the common person to understand. It's our responsibility to make sure it's easier to understand. However that's done, by improved workflows, by hyperlinks, by whatever methodology we see, it's our responsibility. Again, in the previous presentation, Sebastian showed you some registries. And you saw in some examples of the layout and what it looked like. That layout of the registries is all can be 5X'd. It has a lot of visual controls. It should be easy to read, easy to see. These things still apply. It's just in the electronic world versus our physical world. What about standard work development and improvement? Can that be positively identified or positively affected by the cyber-physical systems? Well, we know that with regard to standards, we push up this wheel of improvement. We do Kaizen events. We move it up the hill. And then immediately after that, we try to develop that new standard and shove it under there so it doesn't fall back. That's our goal. And we do that continuously. This is just an example of standard work combination sheet. Many of you may have something similar to this. Just to kind of explain it, because it's kind of hard to see. The thick horizontal lines represent what the operator is doing, a task that they're doing. The little squiggly lines in between represents transportation, or his or her walking between those steps. The dashed lines represents the machine time. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. That's a standard work combination sheet. So how does Industry 4.0, how can it positively affect us? Well, one of the things you can do is monitor this. Let's see real time how we do compared to this standard. This is our standard. This is the way it should be. How often do we check ourselves against the standard? We can monitor machine times. That's not a problem. We can also monitor human being times. We can integrate those as two different data sets and bring them together and compare how our actual standard work compares to our expected standard work. And if there are issues or problems, we can make an alert and identify this as an issue and something that we as human beings in a Kaizen culture can fix. So standard work development is something, and improvement and adherence is something that we can greatly improve through the introduction of Industry 4.0. What about SPC? Okay, SPC is not a lean thing. It's not a Kaizen thing, it's a quality thing, you might say, but it's got the same purpose. To improve, to control. Here's a common SBC chart. As I said earlier today, a lot of organizations, they try to do SBC, but they don't really. They look at the data much too long after the issues occurred. In the ideal world, SBC data, we see it now, we plot it now, we do something about it now. Anytime we have an out of control point, which is a point above or below the red line, or we have a trend of 6 or 7 data points, or we have a run where we're above a line for 6 or 7 data points, depending on how you define it. Any of those types of occurrences, in the ideal world, the way SBC is supposed to work is that we react to it now, and we make an adjustment now. But we don't do that. But in Industry 4.0, maybe we automate that. Maybe when there's an out of control condition, we change the machine parameters. Maybe, because components can talk to each other, if you have a component on the high end of the spec, not out of control, but on the high end, we can ensure that the components speak to each other and match up with a component on the low end of the scale. Maybe that's a possibility. The point is that we're using this data, this data that we have, and we're using it to control other machines or productions or other parts that are coming in. What about Kamishibai? I don't know if everyone has a Kamishibai system, so let me just do a brief explanation, just very brief, and then we'll ask the question, how might Kamishibai positively affect the cyber-physical system? Kamishibai is love. I've always loved it. I love to get to a point with a company where we can introduce it because it's so necessary. It's just a very simple visual auditing system. So how does it differ from another audit, normal audit? Well, number one, as I said, it's very visual. It's easy to see. And number two, like in the lean concept, it's better to do things in single piece flow than in a batch. So in other words, I bet many of you guys out here are with companies that are ISO 9001 certified. And you have to do audits, and it's something you dislike and you disdain, and it's not very effective. And maybe you audit that process once a year. Does that really work? It doesn't. It never works. That's doing an audit in a batch. Doing an audit in a batch doesn't work. But if we believe in audits, we should be doing audits every single day in little bits and pieces, right? It's like if you have kids, if you want to make sure that their room stays clean, you go in there every day and you ask them about something that's out of place all the time. Instead of doing it in a batch when the room becomes a disaster. So the Kamishibai audit system says, you know what, do many little audits on important little topics once a day, frequently, maybe no more than 15 minutes, but do them. So you might have a card system. Each process has an audit card, detailing maybe the check that's required. So in the example on the right, you see standard work. Standard work is a thing that someone will audit every single day. And the detail underneath that might say, audit job instruction XYZ or standard work ABC, wherever they are in the process. And you pull out that standard work, and you go and you audit it for a brief period of time. What are you doing? You're showing how important to the people in the organization these standards are. You know, one question I oftentimes ask people, whatever you call it, I don't care what you call it, if you call it standard work, or job breakdown sheets, or job instructions, or work instructions, or whatever you call it, it's the thing that operators or people are supposed to do on the front line. Okay? Who is the customer, the main customer of those documents? Who is it? Operator? Yes, and that's what everyone says, but I disagree. I forced you into that answer. Everyone says it's the operator, but the products, okay, you can say the products, but I have another answer. But I can understand the products. So we all say it's the operators. The operators don't care about those things. They'll never look at them again. I don't know how many companies I've gone into where they hang up the work instructions. No one ever reads them. No one ever reads them. The true customer of those documents is the team leader, the supervisors. They're the ones that have to use them. How do they use them? They pull those things out in accordance with the Kamishibai audit or leader standard work, and they audit against those because those are their documents. They own them. So a Kamishibai system says, kind of like a layered process audit for anyone who's in the automotive industry, it has a lot of overlap with a layered process audit, except it's visual and it's every day in short bursts of time. And I believe it's much more effective. So the Kamishibai system is there to make sure that the team leaders, the group leaders, the supervisors, whomever it is, all the way up the line, are making sure that the standards are being followed through a brief little audit every single day. Now, what are some of the examples of the things that we can audit? Standard work, our process parameters, meaning pressures, flow, temperatures, pH, viscosity, whatever it might be. PPE might be another topic. Visual aids, total productive maintenance. These are the topics. These are the things that we can perhaps audit on an every single day basis. So these little cards that we have basically have the same exact wording on the front side and the back side. On the front side, we color it green. On the back side, we color it red. So then when we do our little mini audit, because it is so visual, we do the audit, we complete it. If everything's fine, we put the card in a card holder for that day or that shift. So everyone knows an audit was done. Everyone knows an audit was done. And they know the result. Green is good, no problems. Red, we had a difference between expectations and real performance. If we have a red card, then we need to do something about that. And with that red card, we initiate a concern. Maybe use a 3C form. Concern, cause, and countermeasure. Now, how does this affect Industry 4.0? Is there a relationship between the two? Yes, there could be. Okay, nothing will ever replace going to the Gemba. However, if we're doing checks on process parameters or TPM, some of this data we can go ahead and check. We'll have this data. We have it available, especially with regard to process parameters. Let's check the process parameters of the parts of the machine, of whatever it might be. And we have that data, and we can do this automatically at many different machines throughout the entire process, and they're looking at the relationship between the two so that we can understand where there might be deficiencies when we compare our standards to our actual results. Okay, and what about 5S? Well, 5S is, as I said earlier, very interesting in that a lot of us tend to think of 5S as strictly a physical thing, a physical phenomenon. And it is. It's just that our physical world now in the cyber-physical system changes. And we have, as I said earlier, a great deal of messiness within our folders, our landscape, our interaction of processes, our programs, the relationships between our programs, our registries, and it is an unhealthy environment for process flow. And we don't do much about it or to control it. 5S is a great application. Any of the forms that we have, any of the documents, any of the workflows that we use. I mean, I've worked with insurance companies and financial companies, and they'll print out every screenshot of everything that they use of the programs. And they go through a 5S process. And they eliminate all the stuff that they don't use. They get rid of it. Then they set it in order because how they enter information into the fields is all over the place. Now they enter information into a workflow pattern. So it's very applicable in this world. Chevron did a study one time and documented and recorded and documented that the typical office worker spends 10% of their time looking for files. Do you buy that? Does that make sense? That's over 1 hour a day looking for stuff. We don't see this. You know, we talk about the skill of seeing waste, but sometimes we don't see our own waste when we look for things. And how much those seconds add up to perhaps hours. When we introduce Industry 4.0, when you do that, you will have many different systems. You will have different programs, databases, talking to each other. How that's laid out is an application for 5S. It needs to be laid out and understood by the common person so that we can help to fix it. We need to bring the technology to a level that more people can understand. That's our responsibility to see how that relates. And that's part of the relationship between 5S and Industry 4.0. So brief summary, very quick. Industry 4.0 is here to stay due to the immense potential and gaining the competitive advantages. That's what we want. In the Kaizen culture, we want those competitive advantages. So Industry 4.0 is there to help us. We need to embrace, our operational experts need to embrace those cyber-physical systems into our lean efforts. But the lean efforts in Hoshin Kanri should mark the direction, should lay out the direction. And how we do that as part of the third quadrant or the fourth quadrant of an X matrix in Hoshin Kanri. As part of that, how we do that is partially related to Industry 4.0. Remember, this is a cyber physical system. It's not just cyber, and it's not just software. It's also physical. Those elements haven't left. We still need to emphasize the importance of people systems, visual management, and process and system focus continuously. Because as I said earlier, our technological experts may not get this stuff. They may not know this, and we are the experts in these areas. The OEs and the TEs, they need to collaborate, especially during value stream mapping efforts. And the great benefits will truly be realized even further when we incorporate into other cyber-physical systems across the entire scope of the value stream, with our supplier base, with our supply chain, with our customers, across our geographies. There's great potential so that when there is an issue in one plant, there's a machine in another plant that understands that issue and is changing what it's doing. It's modifying its approach, it's modifying its production, it's modifying its quality to adjust. That's where the true benefits will come out. But initially, we start off with Industry 4.0 within our own facility. And we need to understand that we as operational experts need to embrace Industry 4.0 and see how it will encourage and enhance our efforts. So thank you very much.